Hi, Denny Johnson here, and this is about what is Rayid? How do we do a Rayid consultation? What is it about? What good is it? Well, how do we use it? How do you study it if you wish to learn it? This is a basic outline of basically how I use Rayid as a guide to understand and relate to people and to myself. So I'm going to describe for you how I use this to do a consultation. Part of this process is the iris of the eye. The iris of the eye for me is a epigenetic map, what we received when we were conceived, and how this was added to in early childhood. This involves the constitution of the eye. This constitutional pattern has two primary parts, what I call a primary and a secondary. What does the structure of the eye represent? How does that relate to natural abilities or strengths, weaknesses, if you will? There are many creative things that we can learn about a person by looking very closely at the structure of the eye. That's why we use the iris. But the iris is also a reflection of different channels in the body. There are four primary iris constitutions that relate to four ascending and descending forces in the body that, well, by the way, they regulate everything. So understanding the constitutional pattern, how it relates to this movement of life force is important. Because inside this there's also the lessons that relate to different positions of the eye. I use sectors. That is basically the top third or the bottom third of the eye or the middle third of the eye. This is sectors. Or I use rings. All of this is about relationships to our parents, our family tree, ourselves, each other. This is how we use the constitution of the iris itself. This is a long-term constitutional vehicle. This vehicle is modified by other influences, meaning that the birth order or the family tree dynamics, what is your place in the family? And your mother and your father, they had their place in the family, and there was a dynamics in your grandparents about how they treated your parents and so on. And there's virtually, if you want to think of it this way, there's 7 generations of information here. 3 behind you, 3 still to come. There's 7 generations of information that are very important to consider. What you received, what you transmit. So the birth order dynamics is, well, it's important. It's now part of what modifies the structure of the eye. So there is the genetic number, there is the gender number. So if you're the second girl behind 4 boys, for example, or the third girl behind 4 boys, it's a different way that you will express your iris. Now, this also has a social pattern. So you might have been the 6th child, but you were raised alone, or there was an adoption that came in ahead of you. So the social dynamics modifies the original family tree dynamics that modifies the iris. There's endless amounts of information here that modify all of us to become so wonderfully unique. All of this is related to the whole family dynamics in combination with the epigenetics of the iris. All of these now affect what we call the physical signs. Yes, there is a body type for an iris pattern. Generally speaking, there are different constitutions of the body. There's also different body types and patterns in the birth order or the family dynamics. But the epigenetics of the social patterns of the family, they affect how the body displays the information. So you'll have differences in body types when your father is a number 2 boy or your father is a number 4 boy. When your mother is a number 1 or your mother is a number 6. This all modifies the body types and physical signs. But it's not just the body type or the differences in the body type. There's lots of different things that happen to the body that reveal what's happening in the epigenetics. There are current conditions. What symptoms is this body going through? Is there a difficulty that started? Is there an arriving condition? Is there a medical history in the body itself and the family? Your great-grandmother died of cancer when you were 12. It's a whole series of things that affect you, yes. How your grandparents passed is significant to how it influences you. This is all related to the body signs. And yes, this is a lot of information that begins to reveal how the iris and the family dynamics is affecting you. All of this is part of one big map. Lots of information to understand yourself or someone else. Now, all of this is also modified by the age, something we call the timeline. So there is a pattern for the timeline. It's very different to do a consultation for somebody when they're 12 or they're 44. So you have one iris type, you have a birth order, you have a physical body type or a series of symptoms occurring in the family tree. How does that differ when somebody's 12 or 40 or 65 or 80? How do you modify this information according to something we call the cycles and seasons? What's the current cycle somebody's moving through? Very different if you're 22 or you're 62. So this modifies the influences that are traveling through the family. And there are seasons of life. There's the youth or the spring of life. There's the fiery part of life in the 20s. There's the practical side of life in the 30s, and so on and so on. There's cycles and seasons. What are you moving into? What are the natural lessons that your iris type, with its constitutional abilities, how is it different when it's modified by being a 2 girl or a 4 girl and you are 24 or you are 60? How do you modify all of this together to have some degree of comprehension about what's affecting you? That's why the timeline is an essential part of this. You need to modify the iris and the birth order and the body type based on the timeline. When did a trauma occur? What age were you when your parents divorced or your father died of a heart attack? That is a significant point in your life. So looking at the timeline helps us to see that there are cycles of patterns that reoccur for people throughout their life. Now there's more. All of this information comes down to and is strongly influenced by choice. All this really is regardless of the information that you have up here, you can actually make choices. You can make choices to do all 4 different flows of life force because you want to, because you objectively see that it's important to have all of life, the left brain, the right brain, the feminine and the masculine attributes circulating and flowing. You can make choices because you see the information that has been given to you. You can objectively see, yes, I have this iris constitution, I have this birth order position, I have this body type, I have these symptoms, I am this particular age, I see myself going through cycles and seasons. I get it. I want to accept the personal responsibility because I have free will. In some way, I want to be me. I don't want to be you, and you don't want to be me. How do I become exactly what I am? What is my own personal ability? What's my personal passion that's unique to my constitution? How do I express my personal passion differently when I'm a number 2 boy or a number 1 boy? How do I express my personal passion differently when I'm 24 or 64? That's what all of this is about, free will. In order to be able to do this, there's got to be some way that feels like there is a map to be able to pass through life with. That's really what Rayid is. It's a map based on the observation of what occurs in nature, what occurs in the eyes, what occurs in the family, in the body type. This is designed to be a guide. It's not an end-all, be-all. It's not an absolute system in anything because Rayid is in evolution. It's changing. It's growing. I'm changing. You're changing. People who practice this are growing through experiences. This is because we have a choice of what we wish to implement based on how we see life progressing. Because at the very bottom of this, and virtually it's at the bottom line, is change. That's really what we're looking for, how to have some realistic feeling or comprehension about change. How do I get from point A to point B? Or from point A to point M, or X, Y, and Z? How do I get where I want to be? That's really what it's about. How do we change? Is it really necessary to go through all of this and come down to this place of choice and change? No, you can start right down here and go, wait, I get it now. I want to change. I want to be who I am. What are the tools I can use? Is it going to be faith or prayer or affirmations, or is it going to be visualizations? Is it going to be natural medicine and healthy living? Is it just lifestyle? What is the change based on? Well, Rayid's based on a dynamic principle of what is the soul. Now that is confrontational. Is there a soul? Does the soul come back? Does it go on? Where does it go? What is it? How does it function? What is it really about, this thing that we call the soul? Is there a difference between a soul, the spiritual body, and the physical body? Is there life after death? That's really what this is all about. How to be able to implement the beginning of some degree of feelings about who we are, what we are, where have we come from? What do we need to let go of in order to be a different person and to grow? How do we change? How do we live? How do we learn to care about each other? Because part of this is about learning to respect and know other people. How to know your mother and your father differently and deeper. How to know your brother and your sister. How to know your friends and your lovers and your mates. How to know your children. This is about deepening our appreciation for the dynamics of life itself. There's a lot to this. Now each one of these categories here, while there are dozens of videos available here that will teach about the iris. I mean, you can sit down and learn about the iris for days on end and never be done. You can do the same thing with family dynamics. There will be many videos available here. All of these topics, they're part of the Rayid Learning Center. Yes, be patient with me. Yes, I'm still working on these things. All of these topics will be available and you can test them, please. The basics of Rayid is simple. You have to apply it for yourself, but you need to test it. Test every single part of it. Only use things that you feel right about, that feel good to you in some form or another. Constantly test the iris, the birth order things with other people. Learn about the exceptions when you have 6 sisters and they don't match the pattern. Ask yourself, what are the dynamics? Does this thing really work? The body patterns and the timeline, does this really work? Because this is about a process of learning to feel ourselves and each other. This is about dynamic living growth. That's really what Rayid is. Rayid will change. If you believe it's going to be the same tomorrow, then, well, you're mistaken, because it will constantly change, because everybody around us is changing as well. This is a basic introduction to what Rayid is. Yes, you can study it on, Rayid.com. We're developing the Learning Center. It's not done yet. Never will be complete, by the way. And you can also learn it on Rayid Facebook, Rayid International Group on Facebook. You can learn little pieces of it. You can test it. You can ask questions. Lots and lots of information is here. So that's what it's really about. This is a Rayid consultation, and this is, well, how I do it today. Check in tomorrow and I'm sure it's going to change again. Be well.